But So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Results UK Grassroots Conference call for November. With the dark evenings closing in, it feels like the autumn's really here now. I hope everybody on the call tonight is keeping well and healthy. For those of you that are new to Results, my name's Aaron Oxley. I'm the Executive Director, and I'd like to welcome you all to this monthly Grassroots Conference call. You'll have seen we're recording this call. We're going to post the recording on our website for anyone who's missed it to watch later. So please feel free to turn off your video if you'd rather not be on the recording. We're also using automatic captions, which you should be able to turn on or off using the Zoom menu bar. If you're new to Results and you're joining the call for the first time, please feel free to introduce yourself either by turning on your microphone and saying hello or using the chat box. If you do, it'd be great to hear where you're calling in from. And then, of course, if you'd rather not introduce yourself, it's okay not to as well. Any new people tonight want to say hi? I actually don't think I see any. So maybe they'll join us in a minute. So let's just do the housekeeping really quickly. As always, please keep yourself muted during the call. And if you've got a question or a comment, please use the chat box as we go. We'll be collecting questions for our guest speakers that appear in the chat when we get to that part of the meeting. So as always, I'm going to start with an update on what's been going on in the world of international development and how it affects the work of Results to bring about an end of global poverty. First thing I'm going to mention is the thing that's in the news at the moment is the UN climate talks, COP26, with COP standing for the Conference of Parties. That's happening in Glasgow this week. I'm sure many of you will agree that action on climate change, both to curb future greenhouse gas emissions and to deal with the changes that are already happening, is of absolutely vital importance. The countries which have done the least to create the problem are paying the highest price, with many communities on the most marginal land and with the fewest resources having their livelihood shattered by increasingly severe weather events. A former Results staff member, who many of you will know, Pushpanath Krishnamurthy, or Push, as he likes to be called, has walked 1 million steps over the last 3 weeks to take him the 400 miles between London, outside Parliament, up to Glasgow to highlight the need for climate justice. We are also incredibly proud of him because of all the conversations he's had with people up and down the length of the country, to all of the media attention he's created for his immense walk. You can hear a bit more about his commitment in a media interview he recently did. We're going to put a link to that in the chat box just now. And for those of you who don't already know, we do put these links along with the recording each month into a blog, which we'll email out to you, usually in a news flash. So you will have a record of what's shared there, including all of these links. So staying on climate for a minute, another inspirational campaign on climate change is being run by our colleagues in the Send My Friend to School Coalition, which is hosted by Results. They've taken a number of their youth campaign champions to Glasgow, highlighting the impact of climate change on access to education. This matters as education is more and more frequently being disrupted by extreme weather events. Also, it's critical that the views of young people are taken into account when developing policy on tackling climate change. Again, we're going to put some links to all of this action into the chat. Now, we haven't asked you to campaign on climate specifically for some time, and I want to take a moment to explain why, because we would, of course, would have loved to have done some more. But at the heart of it is that we've just really struggled to raise funding for our work on climate specifically. Now, a few years ago, we were able to do some focused work on the financial instruments that can quickly help affected communities after a disaster through the mechanism of climate risk insurance. This refers to insurance policies that are very quickly paid out after a disaster, so that damage to crops or agricultural inputs like seeds and fertilizer can be replaced without farmers and their families going deep into debt. There's something that's quite niche, has a really important part to play in supporting people economically and giving them a chance to rebuild their lives at the times of greatest trial. Put a quick link to what climate risk insurance is in the chat if you want to learn a little bit more about that, if you missed campaigning on it in the past. But just to note, there are, of course, many organizations working on climate change, and hopefully the advocacy that's going on across the sector is making a difference to the people inside the conference hall in Glasgow. Perhaps not unexpectedly, though, we're hearing rumours of foot dragging by some of the more polluting countries and a lack of ambition amongst rich nations to make the changes needed. So this year we did join the Crack the Crises Coalition, which has been trying to create a big public noise around climate at a time when more and more people are waking up to the imminent danger the world is in. While Results is just a small voice in the movement, we do stand in solidarity with the many international development organisations that are doing great work on climate justice. Now, onto some somber news that we've been grappling with since last week, when we heard the long-awaited spending review and budget from Chancellor Rishi Sunak. As I mentioned last month, we've been fearing a further round of cuts on top of the £4.5 billion of cuts already announced in 2020, in which we've been slowly hearing details about all throughout this year. Unfortunately, it looks like additional cuts are indeed happening. And although the precise figure is unclear, it could be around an additional £1 billion more of cuts for the 2022 ODA budget. Using some very mean accounting tricks that no other developed nation is using, the UK government is proposing to count a number of new items as official development assistance, further reducing the amount available to spend on the anti-poverty programs that Results advocates for, on education, health, and nutrition, vaccinations, and fighting infectious diseases, including tuberculosis and COVID-19. Specifically, the UK is planning to count £861 million worth of debt write-off to Sudan as ODA, even though most of that figure is interest accrued on a loan of only £173 million that was originally defaulted on all the way back in 1984. I'm sure you'll agree with me that this is morally repugnant. You can read more about this if you follow the link to the Jubilee Debt Campaign's article on this that we're just going to drop into the chat box. All the details are there. On top of that is the very technical issue of what are called special drawing rights, or SDRs, which are essentially a reallocation of funds paid to creditor nations by the International Monetary Fund, or IMF. Now, that might not make much sense to you unless you're an economist. It certainly doesn't make that much sense to me. But the most simple way of looking at this are these SDRs are a special kind of money that's issued by the IMF to help countries stabilize their economy when faced with shocks like the economic crisis that's been caused by COVID-19. And as one of the biggest creditors of the IMF, the UK has received a major windfall, billions of pounds worth of these SDRs. Some of it the UK plans to make available to other countries to help their economies stabilize, because they need these special drawing rights much more than we do, which is great. But the UK plans for 30% of the value of these SDRs that we make available this way to count towards our reduced 0.5% ODA budget. Now, this is within the globally agreed rules to count this transfer this way, but the UK will also reduce the amount available for additional international development spending even further. No other developed nation is doing this. Instead, they're quite rightly counting this as additional to existing ODA, given the extremely challenging global economic situation. Lastly, the Chancellor confirmed that the cost of donated COVID-19 vaccines will also count towards the ODA budget of 0.5%, even though the Prime Minister explicitly stood up in the House of Commons back in June with his hands on the dispatch box and confirmed that they wouldn't be. And the cost of the vaccines isn't even being counted at the price we paid for them, but at an artificially inflated price, thanks again to the ODA accounting rules. Now, again, this is within the globally agreed rules for how, and so they can be counted, but this doesn't mean that they should be counted this way. What these choices mean is that by donating vaccines, we are cutting our aid budget by more than the value that we paid for the vaccines. In other words, if the Chancellor had chosen not to do this, we could have almost doubled the number of people we vaccinated in developing countries for the same cost to the UK aid budget. You can read more about these iniquitous decisions and this excellent analysis by our friends at Save the Children. Again, we're going to drop that into the chat box. We've also got a summary of the vaccine issue that we tweeted out from our account that's also going to go in there too. Now, a lot more detail is needed to determine exactly how these three costs, debt relief, special drawing rights, and vaccine donations, are going to be spread over a number of budget years. But as I mentioned, this could drop out at being around £1 billion next year alone. These are blatantly political decisions which do nothing to the UK's own economic situation, as most of these are just completely fictitious sums that we don't actually have to find out of the UK budget. This goes directly contrary to the advice we and others have given the government. And even though they haven't listened, I do want to thank all of you who've spoken and campaigned for the COVID dose sharing to be an addition to ODA. We have spoken out, but we have not won yet. I can assure you that we're not going to stop campaigning on this anytime soon, and I hope you can join me in turning anger and outrage at this really immoral set of decisions into focused, powerful, and relentless advocacy to put this right. On that note of getting into action, it's now time for me to hand over to Ruthie to give you all the floor to do the usual roundup of what's been happening in grassroots advocacy around the country. So over to you, Ruthie.
Thanks, Aaron. So a lot has been going on across the Grassroots network, as well as in the world and in British politics over the last month. I'm not going to be able to touch on everything, but I've picked out a few highlights and examples of what you've all been up to. So firstly, thank you to everyone who took action on calling for TRIPS waiver on COVID-19 vaccines, and for following up correspondence on some of the other campaign actions from months earlier in the year. We've seen a few replies and emails back and forth with MPs and ministers. So yeah, well done for your perseverance on that. And this month, there have been a few days marking international days on important issues, such as World Food Day, which was on October the 17th. To mark this day, Jill from the Stork Valley group wrote a great article about nutrition and the need for action in the Independent Catholic News. So well done, Jill. We'll share that in the chat box. And the Cheshire group went out for a meal at the Surplus Foods restaurant and shared a short blog and call to action on their Facebook page, which we'll also share. On October the 24th, it was World Polio Day, so I want to just quickly mention a blog written by Chavi, our polio advocacy officer on child health. It's a really interesting read and a great summary of some of the successes and challenges in the fight to end polio. And as well as some specific advocacy moments in October, it's been a busy time for efforts to grow the network, especially among universities and potential student volunteer campaigners. So the Manchester group attended an in-person volunteering and social justice fair, and we have Diego on the call to tell us briefly about what they did and how that went. So I'll just hand over to Diego.
Hi, hello everyone. I don't know if you guys can hear me. My name is Diego from the Manchester group of results, and this October, in fact 2 weeks ago, between Jess, Tarim, and I, we attended the volunteering and social justice fair to try to recruit new members for our group. It went pretty well because what we did was basically approach any members that went near the stall by telling them if they wanted to change the world. And in fact, it's a difficult question to say no, right? And all of the flyers that we were sent to were gone. In fact, we kind of assumed that it was a very successful event. Yeah, as a matter of fact, we were very, we were even directly asked by students that were studying courses in international development or poverty studies, even environmental management. So yeah, overall, we thought it was pretty successful. On the other hand, we also agree that, or I, on my own perspective, we think that it would be very useful to do to attend these kinds of fairs and events in other universities, and also try to attract other students from other fields so that we have some more diversity of thought in background.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always a bit of a challenge to mix who you get in, but it sounds like it went really well, and we had a few inquiries come through, so hopefully you enjoyed it as well, because it's an experience. And
the experience was in fact great. Yeah.
That's good to hear. So yeah, well done to you, and I know Tarim and Jess also helped a lot with that, so yeah, fingers crossed there are more opportunities for you to do a couple of more fairs like that. I know Cheshire as well spoke at, and that was an online fair at the University of Chester, so it's well done to them. They also made a brilliant video to promote it, so we'll put that in the chat. And I think quite a few other groups were looking out to see what was around. So as always, if ever you need support on that side of things, get in touch with us. So this year we know, well, the last 2 years it's been tricky speaking to your MPs, especially with the pandemic and not knowing with online and in-person communication. So it's great to see that some of you have been trying to arrange meetings and phone calls recently. And Carrie in Birmingham had a chat with her MP. So should we hear about that quickly, Carrie?
Yes. Yeah, hi everybody. I went to the second Saturday of each month is a farmers market in Harborne, and Preet is usually there on her little table talking to everybody. And Preet Gill is my MP. She's a Labour MP. She's the Shadow Secretary of State for Overseas Development. And I stood in a very short queue and talked with her and told her if she wasn't going to COP, why not? She said she was. So she was heading off to COP 26, and I said, look out for Jeffrey Sachs, he might well be there. And she said if there's an opportunity, she will go and listen to him talk. I bigged up results with her. I said he's a very good speaker, and Gina Miller we had a very, very good national conference. And those two speakers were absolutely brilliant. And I said, if they are at COP, please hunt them down. She was going up in, I'm not 100% sure what she said, what capacity, but she's Secretary of State for Overseas Development. So she has got some things to go to see. She's excited about the Commonwealth Games, which are coming to Birmingham, of course. So she's happy with all that. She was in good form. So it was lovely. It was just I grabbed her in the street, which was, at the time I didn't think anything of it because that's what usually I do with her, so she's quite visible. So that was a lovely opportunity. So I had about 10 minutes with her on Saturday in the middle of October, so that was good.
Sounds like you had a very good chat, lots of things covered there. So and she even retweeted our tweet with your lovely smiley photo together, which was nice to see.
Yes.
So just to move, some of you will know already Della is sadly leaving at the end of this week. So I'd just like to take this moment to say a massive thank you, and it's been an absolute pleasure to work with you. The new role sounds amazing. I'm sure you're going to do brilliant things, so best of luck. But I know you wanted to say a few things, so I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Ruthie. Yeah, I'm really sad to be leaving. I just wanted to say it's been so amazing and motivating working alongside all of you. And it's been such an honour to be part of the network. So thank you for being so welcoming from when I started at Results. And you've all taught me so much about advocacy and campaigning. I've loved to see it. And yeah, best of luck with all your campaigning and keep doing what you're doing. I'm sure it won't be my last call, but it's my last call as a staff member. So yeah, I'm sure I'll keep up with what you're all up to. And yeah, just a massive thank you. As Ruthie said, my next role is still going to be related to poverty alleviation and global health. So yeah, very much see that as working in solidarity with all of you. So yeah, thanks a lot. And I'll probably email a couple of you in the week before I leave as well. So yeah, thanks, Ruthie.
Yeah, hopefully we'll see you at our calls in the future. So before I hand back to Aaron, so that we can hear about November's Nutrition Action with a focus on event planning and hear from our guest speakers tonight, I just want to flag our upcoming event on Monday, the 8th of November. So that's a week yesterday, Monday the 8th, 6 till 7 p.m. And it's Meet the Youth Leaders for Nutrition. So it will be a conversation between you wonderful results advocates and the three amazing youth leaders for nutrition, Maxwell, Florence and Webster, who are from Zambia, Rwanda and Zimbabwe respectively, and are also passionate advocates for ending nutrition, and like us are ramping up their advocacy ahead of the Nutrition for Growth Summit. So we'll put the details in the chat, and we did send out an email earlier, but hopefully see some of you there. And that's everything from me, so I'll hand back to Aaron. Thank you.
Thanks, Ruthie. So let's jump straight into the topic of tonight's call, which is once again global nutrition. This is actually the third time this year we'll have asked you to take action on what is an absolutely foundational issue for people's lifelong health, education and opportunities following our campaign actions in May and September. Now, without good nutrition, especially in the early years of life, many children will never develop properly, either physically or mentally. Many of you have campaigned on this, not just this year, but over many years. And some of you will be aware of how the UK government has historically been central to global efforts to improve nutrition, what's called the Nutrition for Growth agenda that we've heard about from several speakers over the year. That includes Miaza Getachew from the organisation called 1000 Days back in September. And pop the recording to that on that in the chat. If you've already taken the action targeting Minister Wendy Morton, she's got the health portfolio in the FCDO, the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. Many thanks. Now, in the final few weeks before the big conference in December in Tokyo, we've got an additional ask for you. And there's three of them. First, we want to target the new Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, who as the responsible Secretary of State has the remit to pledge for the UK government at the N4G summit in Japan. At a time when the pot of ODA money is smaller and possibly even shrinking further, it is particularly vital that nutrition spending carries on at least the level it has previously been to reach 50 million women and girls with nutrition programming by 2025. Second, we've created a shareable E-Action. Now, usually it results, we want people to write personal letters if possible, because that really maximizes impact, it's transformational. However, as we have from time to time in the past, we want to reach more people to take action who might not be confident to do that yet. So this customizable template letter allows them to easily take action and share it with others. We'll be dropping that in the chat too. And lastly, we're hoping that some groups will just have time to squeeze in an event in the run-up to the summit, which starts on the 7th of December. Our best intelligence is that a decision has not yet been made on N4G and may not be, right down to the wire, so most of that time is available. Whether you've got the time to plan a street stall where you can ask members of the public to sign the letter on a laptop or a tablet, or at an advocacy evening where you can ask people to write their own letters based on some pre-written talking points. All you need is in this month's action materials, which were emailed to you last week. So we're actually not going to talk about the details of nutrition today, as we've covered that in detail in previous months. So part of the reason we've been sharing so many links, so you can go back and find that easily. Tonight, what we're going to hear about is the art of event organising. Now, this is something we've not asked groups to do much in the last few years, and while many of you will know how to go about it, some people who are newer to the public campaigning side of advocacy might not have done this before. So this month, I'm really delighted that we've got two speakers. The first is Sophie Willis, Field Organiser with the Aid Alliance, formerly called the Aid Coalition, of which Results is a member. She and her colleagues have been supporting and developing groups of active aid campaigners over the last couple of years, and this work has been really central to the public fight against the aid cuts. And I know that some of you have made contact with the Aid Alliance in your towns. We also have on the call Tahira Kulsoom, who's also from the Aid Alliance and who some of you will have met her at our national conference in September. Welcome, Tahira. So Sophie and Tahira, thank you both very much for joining us this evening. We're really grateful that you've come to talk to us and share your expertise about how to help local groups of people become active for the first time, and specifically to build public awareness and start to run their own events. So I think you've had a bit of an introduction to them already, but let me do it formally and introduce you to the people on this call. Volunteer campaigners from right around the United Kingdom, from Scotland to the South Coast, including lots of people who are very familiar with advocating on global development over many years, but also some people who are quite new and are just starting to learn for the first time about all the issues that we work on when we campaign on aid. We usually start our guest speakers off with a few pre-arranged questions, which we share with you in advance, but this evening we're not going to do that. Instead, we've asked you to start us off with a short presentation which covers what are the things to think about when planning an event, and also share some of the things that your network has been doing in the last year or so. So for the grassroots, this might feel a little bit more like a training session than most conference calls, but we do hope that people will find it useful. Before we jump into that though, I'm going to do what I normally do, which is ask each of you to introduce yourself just a little bit and say, how is it that you got involved in this type of work? What makes you excited to do it? Maybe Sophie, can we start with you?
Of course, yeah. Thank you for having us both here tonight. I'm really excited, and I recognise a few faces and names on the call, which is nice as well. So yeah, I've worked for the aid campaign, now Aid Alliance, since March last year, so March 2020. I'm based in Norwich, and I work with and support 13 local campaign groups in the east of England, so all the way from Norfolk down to Kent, so a fairly big patch. So the Aid Alliance aims to build support for aid and development and related issues, so climate, refugees as well, but primarily aid and development through engaging with MPs and hopefully encouraging support within Parliament, but also within the general public. So I support our local groups to run events, activities, to engage with their MP, and just to generally learn more about the sector and the topic. I actually used to be a volunteer for our group in Norwich, which is how I got into it, and I'm now in the role I'm in now. So yeah, just feel really privileged to work with our groups and volunteers, and kind of see the enthusiasm that they bring from kind of all walks of life. I guess I kind of got into or wanted to work in development because I was lucky enough to go on some voluntary trips when I was a bit younger, and that kind of set me on the course of being interested in this kind of work in this sector. So yeah, really enjoy working with volunteers, and I think that's such an important part of what we do, not just actually the advocacy and work with MPs, but actually supporting volunteers on their journey. And it seems like Results do a brilliant job of that as well. So it's really good to be here. And I'll
Thanks, Sophie.
Tahira.
Thanks, Sophie. Tahira, yeah.
Hey everyone. So Tahira, I'm based in Reading. And how did I get involved? I went and volunteered in Tanzania, had an amazing time with no electricity and no running water for 3 months, but it was the most chilled I've been in my whole life. That's mad, isn't it? Like no running water, no electricity. And was part of the ICS program, which is now stopped. But it was so good, like connecting with people, not speaking the language, but still being able to communicate, like just the way you express and talk is just amazing. So that was good. That's how I got involved. ICS was International Citizenship Service, I think. Is that, oh yeah, okay, cool, nods. That's good, thank you. Yeah, so that used to be that was UK aid funded, and I was lucky enough to benefit from that, and that was luckily before COVID, so I was able to not get rushed back to the UK. So that's how I originally got involved. But historically, I did housing, worked for housing, then worked for council and social regeneration and stuff. But it's interesting how to the core and the internal, if everybody reflects on their life, and I hadn't really done it properly, and then I've had a year of reflection, that the core of what we do and the internal stuff is all related, is always connected, and I think that's what we're here today in this room. So yeah, I think I'm going to pass straight on to Sophie. Is that all right, Aaron? Just go back to Sophie. Sophie's going to present everybody. She's going to be the one who is doing the main speaking, because I never be quiet, as everybody knows. You just need to message me, stop me, make me be quiet. But I'm going to be in the chat box. So if there's any questions, I'm going to respond to that. And me and Sophie are just going to work off each other. But I'm going to pass it over to Sophie now. Thank you.
Awesome, Brill, thank you. So I was going to mention as well that we there's 6 field organisers in our team, and we've got around 70 local campaign groups across England, from northeast, northwest, all the way down to us in the eastern kind of west of London and south. So if any of you would like to kind of post where you are in the world in the chat box so we can see, that would be great, because we've got lots of groups all over the place and it's nice to see where people are coming from. Brilliant. So I will share my screen and get started. I haven't got too many slides, and I'm hoping, if this will go, yeah, to go through them fairly quickly, and then hopefully have a bit of time for questions or whatever format you usually go for afterwards, because we're both, Tahira and I, are very open to answering any questions you have. So thought we'd start with a question of what actually makes a good event. So we in Aid Alliance and with our local campaign groups, we do a lot of events, activities. Obviously the past year, a lot of that has been online, but we're starting to get back to in-person events. So yeah, we'll be sharing some of our experiences and what we've found kind of useful and learnings we've had from the past year or so with what we've been doing. So yeah, question of what actually makes a good event. I think it's important to state that this will differ depending on what your aims for the event are. And this will guide not only the type of event you go for, but the audience you aim to engage with, even how you promote the event. So it's worth kind of giving a bit of thought to that. So most important question initially, at least, is probably what is the aim of the event? Why are you, hosting or holding the event? I've popped 3 examples there. Obviously, there are many aims and reasons why we would hold an event. Awareness raising, MP engagement, volunteer recruitment, even for a local group. And I kind of feel like for the work you're doing with the Nutrition for Growth, with the kind of ask and action being to write a letter to Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, that those kind of first 2, awareness raising and MP engagement, kind of link the best to what you'll be doing over the next month or so. This next one might be fairly obvious, but I think it's worth stating anyway, that the event or activity does need to appeal to people and bring people in. Getting people in the room, whatever that room looks like, whether it's digital or in person, is really important. So you can actually go ahead and kind of take the action that you need to do. So within that, and I mentioned the audience before, I think it's really worth thinking about your audience and how to pitch the topic as a result of who you're kind of hoping to engage with. So as an example, I think we've mentioned kind of street stalls already on the call. Depending on where that stall is, whether it's a high street, town centre, your audience will be the general public, so potentially anyone and everyone walking past, so that's a very broad audience. If you're holding a letter writing session, on the other hand, perhaps with friends, family, wider networks, or kind of established contacts, then your audience will be slightly different, and perhaps the way you engage with them and kind of bring them on board will be different as well. So just something to think about. Yeah, that point again, that getting people in the room, whatever that looks like, is important. And sometimes with events that are kind of appealing to the wider public in a location, having some form of local relevance can be really helpful. I think with a lot of the work we do, obviously in the aid sector and talking about development and things like that, it focuses on people that will never meet in countries that will likely never go to. So sometimes it's kind of bringing that narrative and that empathy and that care for that kind of topic to people and making it, personal to them or having some relevance. So that could be something as simple as having a speaker perhaps from the local area who's got volunteering experience overseas, and encouraging them to kind of share their story, but also, having that link with home and the local area for people. And another helpful thing on that front can be to think about partnering with a local group with shared values. So that's something we've really, really learned this year is how successful it can be to find a similar group or organisation to kind of partner with, whether it's on a street stall or an event or something like that. And obviously that widens out your networks and your potential audience as well. Brill. So obviously there are lots of different types of events to consider. And as I said before, it depends on your aims and your audience and what you're aiming to do. I thought I'd take you through some of the events that we've held, some of our local groups have held over the past year or so. And yeah, talk about some of the things that we have kind of learned to consider and things that are helpful to look out for. This list is obviously not exhaustive at all, and some of you might have experience with these kind of events and activities already. So if you've got any other examples, or you've attended or held a different kind of event, feel free to pop them in the chat box, because it'd be great to hear more about those. So street stalls, particularly with an action for MP engagement, is one of the main things that we do with our local groups. So we've got some examples there. That first one outside was in Chelmsford earlier this year. And the other picture is from my colleague's street stall in Wilmslow, I believe, in the northwest. She was inside, which is kind of the aim for everyone on a street stall, rather than a kind of cold high street, cold, wet and windy. But I think we were lucky with the weather in Chelmsford. So yeah, just trying to make it kind of as colourful, exciting, eye-catching as possible, so that people hopefully can kind of see it and come over to chat on their own, off their own backs. Our action for MP engagement on a street stall is to run a postcard petition. So we ask people to leave a message, to write a message of support for aid, development, tackling the climate crisis. And we send them in, hopefully in a nice big batch. We aim for 100 postcards wherever we go, and send them into the local MP. Obviously this year, with the cuts to the aid budget, that's been our main focus. So chatting to people about the cuts, what that means, the impact that has, and hopefully encouraging them to write a little personal message, which will go to their MP. Speaker events, talks, discussions. Obviously, the past kind of year and a half, we had to kind of switch to digital events, Zoom calls, Zoom speaker sessions. So the screenshot there, we were actually lucky enough to be joined by a volunteer who used to live in Norwich and is now in India. So actually, in terms of location and geography, it wasn't an issue anymore, and we were able to have him dial in all the way from India, which was incredible. And the other picture is from pre-COVID. One of our volunteers, I believe in our Farnham group, talking about her experience volunteering in Calais. So yeah, again, some really, really exciting kind of events and discussions we've been able to have at different stages. Film screenings. This was actually a film screening in Liz Truss's constituency of the Kite Runner. And it was in the week that she was actually promoted, well, reshuffled into her new role as the Foreign Secretary. And obviously events in Afghanistan had been unfolding as well for the last couple of weeks. So it was a really kind of topical and timely event, which was great. So yeah, film screenings, another great option. Photography exhibitions, fairs, markets, stallholder exhibitions, loads of different types of events and activities you can get involved with. Our volunteers have got involved with all of these types of events, whether it's joining a street stall for 1 or 2 hours, helping to plan, the speaker events, or perhaps even talking at one of our speaker events, even promoting the event with friends, family, wider networks. There's always a role, no matter how big or small, that volunteers can get involved with and do get stuck into. And what I'll say on street stalls as well, I've got a bit more information on that coming up, but we have a lot of conversations. They don't always result in a postcard, but I've done 34 days worth of street stalls since May this year. So our summer is usually quite packed with street stalls. And in terms of the usual number of postcards we collect, that and conversations we have, that equates to kind of well over 1,000 conversations across the summer. And I've got colleagues who are doing their own street stalls as well. So we end up having a fair few conversations with the general public, which is great. So things to think about. I'll go into a little more depth on street stalls and speaker events, talks, but very happy to yeah, go over any questions on other types of events and activities later on if that's helpful as well. So these are just some of our learnings, I think, that we've kind of found over the past year, 2 years, on what's helpful to think about. So with street stalls, obviously, first thing, it's helpful to think about where you want to hold your street stall. We typically end up on high streets, on you know, town centres, that kind of the busy footfall areas. So permissions you'll need to think about, whether it's contacting local council, market, private company. Always kind of check first if you need permission to be where you are. Staffing the stall, we aim for at least 2 people on the stall at any one time, just to help with conversation, if any of you need to take a break, that kind of thing. Equipment and resources needs to be eye-catching and interesting, and obviously if you've got an action or an ask, then having that ready, whether it's postcards or, you know, laptop to get people to sign the letter, that kind of thing. Think about the weather. Obviously we're in autumn now, so that does need to be taken into account. Don't necessarily want to be standing in the rain and the wind. It doesn't usually attract many people in, so that's something to bear in mind as well. Yeah, have a specific message and an ask, and think about the outcome that you want. Obviously in this instance it's chatting to people about the nutrition for growth and getting people to sign the letter. I think one thing to bear in mind is that obviously you're talking to the general public, so those potentially interesting conversations, it's helpful to be prepared, and also to be open to, you know, conversations potentially getting derailed. Some people will have no idea what we're talking about. Some people will just want to chat and kind of share their life story, which is absolutely fine as well. But yeah, just being prepared for those kind of conversations. And yeah, with events, thinking about whether you want it to happen online or in person, advertising for that and kind of making it appealing, reaching the people that you want it to reach. That might be done on Facebook, flyers, and think about having Eventbrite as a registration portal as well. Obviously, if you're having an event where you just invite family, friends or your network, it might not need to be as kind of organised as that. And again, equipment and resources and that kind of thing. So engaging with people on your topic. I think the key things that we've learned on this is to meet people where they are. So like I said, not everyone will have the same level of knowledge or understanding. And sometimes it's helpful to find an issue or even just wording that actually people can relate to, and then you can kind of take the conversation on from there. So with a topic like nutrition, potentially going in talking about food and hunger, especially if you're on a street stall, and kind of hopefully letting the conversation flow from there and getting to more of the specifics. And another key thing is listening to understand, so really taking in what people are saying and their thoughts and their kind of opinion and viewpoint, and having that conversation, finding something that you can agree on with what they're saying, and then hopefully, you know, bring in more specifics and yeah, and hopefully, you know, have a conversation that leads them to taking the action. And then another key thing is having specific examples of your topic to highlight the impact. And I think from the resources that you've got on this topic, you've got some brilliant stats and examples to give. And we've found, especially with the aid cuts, that having those more tangible examples are really helpful. Even if people aren't aware of the cuts, or it's not really something that's of interest to them, we've found that specifically when you start talking about girls' education, for example, or health services for women and girls, and the fact that that's going to be cut, people really, you know, feel a kind of outrage for that. So I think, you know, if you can mention the impact that malnutrition is having on children and women and really bring it home to them, that's really helpful as well, and it resonates. So I think that's the last of my kind of learnings and things like that. The last slide we were going to put up is just some questions for your, for yourselves as you're planning and thinking about an event, and kind of reflections on what might be helpful to initially start thinking about before planning and organising an event. And obviously that's not exhaustive either, and you might have some other questions and thoughts before you start planning. So yeah, that's a very quick whistle stop tour because I'm conscious of time, but very happy to take questions, or yeah, happy to go with whatever format next.
Thanks, Sophie. Yeah, I think questions are good, but just let me thank you for that great overview. I think that should really help groups think about how they could plan an event to interact with interested members of the public. Just to flag, another reason why we wanted to ask results groups tonight to do this, if you can, and of course don't worry if you can't, is that of course after 18 months or more of not meeting each other face to face for the most part, we thought it was really important that you think about meeting up and planning something together if you haven't already. And this is really vital, you feel you can do that safely. And if you can't, that's fine too. We really don't want anyone taking any action that makes them feel unsafe, but we do think it might be quite nice to get together. Well, let's just go straight into conscious time. Let's go straight into questions for Sophie and Tahira. Does anybody want to pop something in the chat? Anybody want to unmute themselves and yell something out? Or alternatively, you can of course text in your questions as per normal to 0777 56 111 78. Anybody have any questions?
I'll just do it while everybody's thinking. I'll just do a real quick practical COVID one, I think, which we learned, which is we had, oh God, here's one I made earlier, as if I've got it in the back of my room, right? So we have a process, and I just want to say this because then we kind of go, hey, do you want a pen? Do you want a bit of this? So we give it to them in their hand, like we reach over, squeeze a little bit, then we clean the pens, then we can reuse the pens. Just so you know, then that also, I feel, that allows people to think, oh right, okay, they're prepared. They're not just going out there, we're not putting each other in danger. So from a practical point of view, we just have two different stations. We've got like a pasting table, and we just put two people, one person there, if two people come along. So from a practical, I'm going to call it COVID point of view, really, you can really, it's easy to do. And when someone's floating, you just ask them, yeah, okay, we'll sort of be able to talk to you. And the displays and signs, which Sophie was talking about, absolutely brings people in. I've done a few tables without anything, and I've done a few tables with stuff, and it just, what you doing? And one thing we get is, are you asking for money? And we don't ask for any money. So we're like, no money. We're just asking for your voice. So I think it's just, that's why it was key when Sophie said, what are you asking for? What is the purpose of you being there? Is it just to inform? Is to try to recruit local volunteers? What are you looking to do? That was my practical COVID thing. Any questions, everyone? Because I like to pick on people, anybody who knows me from before, and I will call out names. So you've got 5 seconds before I call a name out. Wendy, I know you guys. Question. Unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay. Great to see you. If it's a small group, a very small group, what would you concentrate on? Because obviously it's a small group, it's a small resource, and it's a small town. So would you like hit the high street once every so often? Would you go for a regular presence, or maybe a more sort of showy event just once a year, or how would you play it?
So that's a really good question, and I would say it depends on what you think is best for your area. So it's not I think events stroke activities are all about, it's about quality rather than quantity, because you don't want to tire yourself out as well. So if you think to yourself, do you know what, actually now's the time to do a film screening, let's plan for that, let's get a few people who will work with us, or a few partners. So the event Sophie did, she had 2 local partners, which was Amnesty International and another one, and I can't remember off the top of my head. But what we didn't do is we didn't do it alone, if that makes sense, because you then bring the cohort. But then nothing stops you thinking, like, so we kind of go, oh, we know COP's coming up, so COPs are quite a good sort of focal point, so therefore we can hold a stall which then links to that. I hope that makes sense. I know I haven't totally answered it, but I think
no,
it's
it does
about,
make sense.
yeah. So seeing what it is.
Yeah, and collaborations are good.
Yeah, we would absolutely suggest that, because you end up like, you've all got the same values, we've all got the same thing which we're working towards, and yeah, you're not rewriting the wheel as well.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you.
Okay, well done.
Another question before, like, so you got another 5 seconds. You know how this works, people. You know how I do this, and then I'll pick on somebody. Jill, right? Okay, I'm going to do you today. Share a little bit, because I saw that you had something in the chat box. Question, or this is what I've done before.
Okay, I've put in the chat box that Anne and I did an amnesty stall, and we did it on the Saturday nearest to Human Rights Day, December the 10th. And we actually sent a greetings card to somebody. But there were lots of conversations. We always invited the MP to come along. And if you do that, you get all their media stuff attached to it, because they know how to get it into the paper. So you get publicity as well. But always take a camera so you can take a photograph. And if you haven't got anybody along, you can do a write-up and offer it to the local press or whatever it is, and that works really well. You can make a lot out of nothing, really. We get the car park, the charity car park, every other year, and we use that as an opportunity to talk to people as well. I've also talked to women's institutes. I've done 2 women's institutes. They're always looking for speakers, and there's other groups that are always wanting speakers, you know, which is good once you get onto that. So, and can I just say welcome to Heidi, it's her first meeting. I invited to come along, and you're very welcome. I've explained in the chat box, we're talking about organising events. That's a bit different this time.
Thanks, Jill.
Cool. Yeah, very good point, Jill. People are looking for speakers, and I think if you have an opportunity, you can always do that as well. So that's it. I think that is me and Sophie have shared. So we're going to pass back to you, Aaron.
Thanks so much for that, Tahira. We
actually, sorry,
Yeah.
I always do this. I remember a point. So interesting conversations. Expect somebody to come over and do a mini shout at you. Like, I call it a mini, like, prepare yourself mentally so that you don't get a bit shocked. So just prepare yourself. And that's why we say that there should be 2 people, because then you're just looking out for each other. Sorry, Aaron, just wanted to say that as the last one. Thank you.
No, quite all right. So just we've only got 5 minutes. So unless there are any other questions or comments or observations, I might start to look to summarize for the call for this evening. Last call on questions. Jill, your hand's up.
It's a kind of an important one. I can't remember the name of it, but you need insurance to be able to put up a street stall in case anything happens to the general public.
Liability.
That's the word. Public liability insurance. Has Results got public liability insurance?
Naveed, do you want to actually speak to that rather than just give a thumbs up? I'm not sure everybody can see your face.
My sound's not working.
Oh, we can hear you.
Oh, you can. Okay.
Yeah.
My computer's frozen. I've been sat here not being able to do anything. So yeah, we do have them. We get it every year. So just give the office a call and we can just send you. It's a PDF and that will satisfy anybody, whether it's a local authority or landowner or whatever. We can just get that to you straight away.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? While people think of them, one thing I will say, I mean, I definitely agree on the answer to the question, do you want money? The answer is, I'd prefer your time. I think, we're not sending you out to fundraise this time. Very much, if you think about it, you might get a fiver from a very generous individual, but what we really want is, a few £100 million. I mean, that's actually what we're after. And they're not going to get that out of their pocket, but we know the government's got it. So we want to make sure that that money is going into the highest impact nutrition interventions that exist in the world. So that's really the ask. And so I hope that you can have really, really powerful and interesting events and get some of these messages in front of Liz Truss so that she knows that we really want to make sure that she's got to go to Tokyo and make a big and meaningful pledge. Just to flag that, it's a relatively quick turnaround on this one, in the sense that the conference is happening on the 7th of December. So you've got a couple of weeks to really get out there and get this done. But as we said, the decision probably won't be taken till the very last minute. So this is really meaningful stuff to be giving that last little push. It's really, really important. I think within the last 2 minutes, I'm going to have to start wrapping up. So first of all, a big thank you to Sophie and Tahira. Really great to have your expertise. All of the stuff that you've been doing publicly over the last year. Great partners. And thank you for sharing with us your energy and your wisdom. In terms of everybody else, thank you so much for your engagement with the slightly different format. We're shaking it up a little bit. We would like some feedback on how you found things this evening. So do feel free to send that through to Naveed or Ruthie. Unfortunately, you won't be able to send your feedback through to Della unless you get in very quick, because she's leaving us quite soon. I just want to personally thank you, Della. You've been absolutely amazing at results. Everybody in this call can attest to that. I know you're just going to absolutely smash it at Sightsavers. You've been a real star for all the media work, grassroots work, and everything for us. And we've learned so much from you. We're going to miss you a lot. And of course, in typical Della fashion, she didn't want us to make a big fuss, but I think you'd all be very grumpy with me if I didn't give you the opportunity to thank her and wish her well properly. So please do unmute yourselves for a second, and we'll say a big goodbye and thank you to Della.
Bye, Della.
Thank
you, everyone. You're very kind.
All the best, Della.
And
it's
with
really
that,
lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, we'll miss you. Have fun though. It's been a pleasure. But that very sadly means that we've run out of time for everything this evening. Thank you to all of you for your interest, enthusiasm for and advocacy work on nutrition, and hopefully this push just before the N4G conference will make a difference to how the UK spends its aid budget, and that we will end up devoting enough to nutrition. Thank you again to Sophie and Tahira for spending time with us tonight and for sharing that knowledge. As I mentioned, this is a different but complementary form of action to all the relationship building with MPs and letter writing actions that so many of you have been doing so well throughout the years. This is a really important part of helping build political will on the issues we care about, and I hope you can have some fun doing it safely. Well, very last of all, for your diaries, next month's conference call is on Tuesday, the 7th of December. Note the date. It's going to be an exciting time during the day with the conference going on in Tokyo. They're a few hours ahead of us, so we may have some interesting news for you coming in live. Let's see. But we'll be looking forward to the issues we'll be asking you to take on in action next year. So thank you, as always, for your advocacy efforts, in particular if you're able to take this month's action, whether or not you're able to pull off an event. Goodbye for now, and please enjoy the rest of your evenings. Thanks so much.